It started with a notification. Not mine, hers. A short, sharp buzz in the silence of our bedroom. The glow of the screen flickered against the sheets, casting a dim light over her hand, which was still curled loosely around the phone. She had fallen asleep with it in her grasp, fingers slightly slack, breath slow and steady. That wasn't unusual. Lately, she had been glued to that thing, always texting someone, always scrolling, always turning it just slightly when I walked by. At first, I told myself it was nothing. People get attached to their phones. Social media, group chats, stupid memes, harmless things. I try not to be one of those guys, the type that got paranoid over nothing. But something had been gnawing at me for weeks. It was the little things, the details you only pick up when you've spent years with someone. The sudden obsession with working out when she had never cared before. The fresh manicure every 2 weeks when I knew damn well she used to go months without bothering. The perfume, heavier, more noticeable, the kind that lingered in the air long after she walked out the door. Then there were the showers. Always at odd hours, late at night, or the moment she got home. I had once made a joke about it. Something dumb, something meant to be playful. She had laughed, but it was forced. And now here I was, sitting in bed next to my sleeping wife, staring at the glowing screen of her phone as another notification popped up. I reached for it before I could stop myself. I told myself it was just a glance, just to ease my mind, to prove to myself that I was being crazy. But deep down, I knew the truth. You don't check unless you already know. The message was still on the screen. I'll pick you up a few blocks away. Can't risk your husband seeing. My grip tightened around the phone. Another message popped up, and then another. I missed the way you looked at me in the rear view last time. Same hotel. My blood ran cold. I felt it first in my chest, then in my hands, a slow, creeping heat that spread like fire. I scrolled up with my thumb, scanning through weeks, no, months of messages. At first, they were nothing. Just small talk. Complaints about traffic. Jokes about bad passengers. But then it changed. You smell amazing. Wish I was dropping you off at my place instead. And she had encouraged it. Not just polite responses. Not the kind of thing you send when you're humoring some idiot who won't take a hint. No, she had flirted back. She had played along. She had sent emojis, laughing at his stupid little remarks, teasing him, leading him on. And then came the confirmations. Meetups, plans, hotels. I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached. I tried to breathe, but the air in the room felt different now, thicker, suffocating. The walls felt closer. The bed, once warm, now felt cold, unfamiliar. She stirred slightly beside me, shifting on her side. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I had built my life with. The woman I had trusted, loved, fought for. The woman I had kissed on our wedding day, who had stood in front of me with tears in her eyes and promised me forever. And now, she was nothing but a liar. A cheating liar. My hand shook, but not from sadness. No, it wasn't sadness anymore. Whatever sadness had been there at first had already curled up and died, smothered under something else. Something hotter. Rage. I wanted to wake her up right then and there. Shake her, scream in her face, make her see what she had done. I wanted to watch her scramble for excuses, watch her stammer and choke on her lies. I want to see her realize, really realize, just how badly she had screwed up. But something stopped me. Not restraint. Not some noble attempt to handle this the right way. No, it was something else. Something sharper. Hatred. I had never hated her before. Not even in our worst fights. Not even in the moments when we had been at our lowest. But now, it filled me, pulsed through me like an electric current. She had done this to me. She had turned our life into a joke. She had met up with some random Uber driver in cheap hotel rooms while I had been home like a fool, waiting for her, loving her, trusting her. My pulse thundered in my ears. I had no plan, no clear thought beyond the need to act. I wasn't going to sit here and do nothing. She wanted to play games? Fine. I was about to end them. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat in bed, back rigid against the headboard, phone gripped so tight my fingers ached. My eyes never left the screen, scrolling up and down through the messages, reading every disgusting, pathetic little detail over and over again. The timestamps, the locations, the way she talked to him. It was all there, laid out in front of me like a puzzle where every piece pointed to the same damn thing. She had been cheating on me. For months. And the worst part? It wasn't some coworker. It wasn't an old flame. It was some random guy who drove her around for a living. A nobody. A bottom feeder with a cheap car and a smooth mouth. One of those guys who probably relied on flirtation for extra tips. And my wife? She had fallen for it. No, worse, she had wanted it. She had met him in secret, planned it carefully. The messages spelled it all out. She would leave the house, tell me she was running errands or grabbing coffee with a friend. Then she would walk a few blocks over, never directly from home, never from work. She thought she was smart, thought she had covered her tracks. But she hadn't counted on me seeing this. The minutes bled into hours. I sat in the dim glow of her phone screen, my thoughts a chaotic mess of rage, disgust, and a deep, burning need for revenge. I glanced at her. She was still asleep, peaceful, dreaming, like she hadn't been sneaking off to some filthy hotel with a man who probably still had fast food wrappers in his back seat. Like she hadn't lied to my face every single day for months. My stomach twisted. I needed to get up. I needed air. Slowly, carefully, I pushed the sheets aside and slid out of bed. I stood there for a moment, staring down at her, my fists clenched at my sides. She didn't even stir. Of course not. She was comfortable, safe. She had no idea that I knew. That wouldn't last much longer. I ended up in the kitchen, pacing in tight, furious circles. My breathing was heavy, sharp, barely contained. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those texts again, flashing across my vision like a cruel joke. I missed the way you looked at me in the rear view last time. The rear view. I felt something snap inside me. That meant she had been in his car. Probably more than once. That meant they had driven around together, laughing, talking while I was sitting at home, completely oblivious. Maybe she had fixed her makeup in his sun visor. Maybe she had left fingerprints on the window, little traces of herself that I would never see. Maybe she had touched him in that car. My fists hit the counter before I even realized I had moved. The dull thud echoed through the kitchen, and I sucked in a deep breath, failing to steady myself. I couldn't just stand here, drowning in it. I needed to do something. I unlocked her phone again, scrolling past the messages until I found the number. No name, no saved contact, but I knew exactly who it was. My thumb hovered over the call button. It would be so easy. One tap, and I'd hear his voice. One tap, and I could confront him, demand to know exactly what kind of man he was, what kind of man screwed another guy's wife for sport. But I hesitated, because if I called now, if I went off like this, she would hear. She would wake up, and I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. She had spent months sneaking behind my back. Now was my turn. I grabbed my keys. It was still dark when I left the house. The streets were empty, streetlights casting long shadows over the pavement. I drove aimlessly for a while, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I didn't have a destination. I just needed to be away. Away from her. Away from that bed where she had slept soundly after spending God knows how long with another man. I ended up at a gas station a few miles away. Pulled in without thinking, left the engine running. I sat there, staring blankly at the neon lights flickering above the pumps. My thoughts kept looping back to him. Who the hell was he? I had no name, no face, just a phone number and the knowledge that he had been inside my wife. A fresh wave of anger rolled through me. I opened my phone, typing the number into a reverse lookup site. The signal was weak. The search took longer than I wanted. But finally, a name appeared. Daniel Carter. I exhaled sharply. Just seeing it there, in plain text, made it feel realer somehow. This wasn't just some faceless, nameless threat anymore. This was an actual person, a man who had knowingly slept with my wife. I clicked deeper, scanning through whatever public records I could find. No social media, no obvious connections. But I did find something, his license plate, and an address. My fingers tightened around my phone. I had options now. Choices. I could go home, pretend I never saw anything, swallow my pride, and let her continue making a fool of me. Or I could burn it all down. I stared at the address, heart pounding. What would she do if I confronted her? Lie. Of course she would. I could already hear it, the stammering excuses, the weak denials, maybe even the tears. But I wasn't in the mood for lies. I wanted truth. And if she wouldn't give it to me, I would take it from him. I turned the car back onto the road. The night wasn't over yet. I drove. The world outside was a blur. Street lights streaking past, the hum of the tires filling the silence in the car. My hands were locked on the wheel, fingers stiff, knuckles pale. I wasn't even thinking about the road. I was thinking about him. Daniel Carter. A name. A real, breathing person. A man who'd been with my wife. I repeated it in my head over and over, trying to picture him. What kind of guy was he? Some sleazy lowlife who made a living off driving drunk idiots around town? A smooth talker who preyed on bored wives, throwing out casual compliments until they started feeling young again? I imagined him sitting behind the wheel, one hand on the gear shift, the other tapping at his phone, waiting for the next ride to come through. Maybe he did this often, seduced married women, made them feel special, convinced them that what they had at home wasn't enough. And my wife? She had fallen for it. Or maybe she had wanted it from the start. Maybe it had nothing to do with him. Maybe it didn't matter who it was, as long as it wasn't me. The thought made my grip tighten on the wheel. My jaw clenched so hard it ached. I needed to see him, face to face. I needed to know exactly what kind of man my wife had been spreading her legs for. And he needed to know exactly who the hell I was. His address wasn't far. A few miles across town, in a neighborhood I wouldn't have looked twice at before tonight. I pulled up a block away, killing the engine, watching. A rundown apartment complex. 3 stories, cheap rent, parking lot half filled with dented cars. The kind of place where people didn't ask questions. His car was there. I recognized the plate immediately. A black sedan, nothing fancy, but clean. I sat there for a long moment, staring at it, my fingers tapping against the steering wheel. What was I going to do? I hadn't planned this far ahead. I had left my house running on pure anger, with no real thought beyond finding him. Now I was here, the weight of reality pressing down on me. I wasn't a criminal. I wasn't the kind of guy who got into fights in parking lots. I wasn't reckless. At least, I hadn't been before tonight. I grabbed my phone and opened her messages again, scrolling to the last one. Same hotel. That had been sent earlier tonight. So she had planned to meet him. That meant if I had been asleep, if I hadn't checked her phone, she would have slipped out and gone straight to him. And I would have been in bed, completely oblivious, like every other night before this one. I nearly saw red. I got out of the car, slamming the door shut behind me. The building's entrance was unlocked. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing through the dimly lit hallway. The smell of stale beer and cheap takeout lingered in the air. 3rd floor, apartment 307. I walked up the stairs slowly, my pulse hammering. With every step, the rage inside me burned hotter. By the time I reached his door, I wasn't thinking about anything except confrontation. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. Was he even home? His car was outside, unless he was out in someone else's. My stomach twisted at the thought. I raised my fist to pound on the door again, but then movement. Footsteps. A shadow passed behind the peephole. Then the door cracked open, just an inch, a sliver of dim light spilling into the hallway. And there he was, Daniel Carter. He looked younger than I expected. Mid-30s, maybe. Short brown hair, stubble on his jaw, tired eyes that flickered with immediate suspicion when he saw me. Yeah, he muttered, keeping the chain locked. His voice was hoarse, like he had just woken up or had been drinking. I didn't answer right away. I was looking at him, the man my wife had chosen. Up close, he wasn't impressive. Just average. A guy you'd pass on the street and forget a second later. Nothing about him stood out. And yet, he had been enough for her. Enough for her to risk everything. Enough for her to sneak around, lie, betray me. The anger inside me boiled over. Open the door, I said. His eyes narrowed. Who the hell are you? You know exactly who I am. For a second, he didn't react. Then, something flickered in his expression, recognition. I saw it. The moment he realized. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Look, man, I don't know what she told you. Open the damn door. He hesitated. I don't think that's a good idea. I took a step forward, lowering my voice. You think I give a damn what's a good idea? A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Look," he muttered. I didn't know she was married at first. She didn't tell me. Lie. I knew it was a lie because of that text. Can't risk your husband seeing. She had told him. He had known from the beginning. And he had done it anyway. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay in control. If I lost it now, if I threw a punch, I'd be the one in cuffs before sunrise. But I wanted to hurt him. I wanted him to feel humiliated, just like he had done to me. I leaned in closer. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, voice like ice. "You're going to stop talking to her. You're going to delete her number, her messages, everything. You're going to pretend she never existed." He swallowed. "And if I don't?" I smiled. "You don't want to find out." For a long moment, he just stood there. Then, without another word, he slammed the door in my face. I didn't move. I stood in that hallway for another minute, breathing heavy, heart still hammering. And then, slowly, I turned and walked away. I wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. I drove home slow, the adrenaline still burning through my veins. My hands were steady on the wheel, my breathing measured, but inside, I was a storm. Daniel Carter had looked afraid. Good. I wasn't some clueless husband who would cry into his pillow and pretend everything was fine. I wasn't going to sit back while some two-bit Uber driver stole pieces of my life. No, he knew now. Knew that I had seen, knew that I wasn't backing down. But he wasn't the real problem, was he? He was just an option she had chosen. She was the one who had stepped outside our marriage, made her decisions, planned it all out like I was too damn stupid to ever figure it out. And she was about to wake up to reality. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was still dark. She was inside, sleeping, safe, comfortable. That wouldn't last. I walked in without turning on the lights, moving through the house with the kind of calm that felt unnatural. Every breath I took felt sharper, more deliberate. I knew what was coming next. I climbed the stairs slowly, footsteps muffled by the carpet. My heart was a steady drumbeat in my ears. When I reached the bedroom, I stopped in the doorway. There she was, my wife, lying there like she hadn't betrayed me, like she hadn't spent the last few months sneaking off to meet another man in cheap motels. Her phone was still on the nightstand, exactly where I had left it. I stepped forward and grabbed it, unlocked it. The messages were still there. The proof, the evidence. I looked at her one last time, then inhaled deeply before shoving the phone into my pocket. Then, I turned on the light. She groaned softly, shifting under the blankets. Squinted up at me, eyes still heavy with sleep. "Babe." Her voice was thick, groggy, confused. I just stood there, watching. Then, like something in her sensed it, she sat up, blinking fast, her expression shifting from tired to something else. Something uncertain. "W, what time is it?" she muttered. I didn't answer, because this wasn't small talk. She rubbed her eyes, her gaze flicking to the clock. "Did you just get up?" Her voice was softer now, like she knew something was wrong. I reached in my pocket and pulled out her phone. Then, slowly, I tossed it onto the bed. She flinched. She knew. I saw it in her face, the split second of panic before she could hide it. "What's wrong?" she asked, but it was weak. Forced. I didn't answer. I just watched. Her eyes darted to the phone, her fingers tightening on the sheets. She didn't touch it. Didn't dare. Not yet. I took a slow, deliberate step forward. "You got anything you want to say?" Silence. Her throat bobbed. What do you mean?" She was playing dumb. Like the messages weren't right there. Like I hadn't just spent hours reading them, memorizing every disgusting little detail. I smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. I wasn't sad. I wasn't broken. I was furious. I reached down and grabbed the phone from the bed, flipping the screen toward her. The messages were open. That one text glowing in the dim light. Same hotel. She went completely still. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Then, finally, she looked up at me. And I saw it. The moment she realized there was no way out of this. I tossed the phone back onto the bed. "Try again," I said, voice flat. Her lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time in our entire marriage, she had nothing to say. The excuses started slow. At first, she denied everything. "It's not what you think. He's just a friend. You're overreacting." Then, when she realized that wasn't going to work, she shifted tactics. It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. I was going through a hard time. Then came the blame. You've been distant. I felt lonely. You don't look at me the same way anymore. I let her talk. I let her spill out every excuse, every pathetic attempt to twist this into something other than what it was. And when she was done, I laughed. I actually laughed, because it was so pathetic. She had planned all of this, covered her tracks, snuck around, lied to my face for months. And now that she was caught, she was reaching for anything to soften the fall. But there was nothing left for her to grab. I wasn't some idiot. I wasn't weak. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let her rewrite reality. So when she finally stopped talking, when she looked up at me with those wide, desperate eyes, waiting for me to say something, I just turned around and walked out. I didn't go far, just downstairs into the living room where I sat in the dark, staring at nothing. Upstairs, I could hear her moving, pacing, crying. It didn't matter. She could cry all she wanted. The truth was still the truth. She had betrayed me, and now she was going to pay for it. I sat in the dark, staring at nothing. The house felt different now, like something had cracked open, like the walls weren't holding things in the way they used to. Everything looked the same. The furniture, the photos on the walls, the little decorations she had picked out over the years. But it was all fake, just like her. Upstairs, I could hear her pacing. The floorboards creaked with every nervous step, a slow, hesitant rhythm. Every now and then, she would stop, probably standing by the bedroom door, probably thinking about whether or not to come down. I almost wanted her to. I wanted her to try to force out another excuse to beg. Because I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The problem with cheaters is that they think they can talk their way out of anything. They think that if they cry hard enough, if they promise enough, if they make just the right excuse, everything will magically go back to normal. She didn't realize it yet, but this was the end of normal. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. She still hadn't come downstairs. Coward. I exhaled sharply and pulled out my phone. Daniel Carter. I still had his number. The temptation to text him, to push this further, was there. I wanted to see what he would say now that he knew I existed, now that he knew I wasn't the type of man to let this slide. But he wasn't my priority anymore. I had already won against him. She was the one still trapped upstairs, sitting in the mess she had made, waiting, hoping that I would just go to sleep and let this all blow over. I could almost feel her, curled up in bed, eyes wide, brain working overtime to figure out what she should say next. Should she apologize again? Should she come clean? Should she act angry at me for going through her phone? She had no idea what to do, because she had already lost. I leaned back into the couch, rubbing a hand over my jaw. I wasn't just going to kick her out and let her walk away clean. No, that would be too easy, too painless. I wanted her to suffer. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done. And the best way to do that, I had to make her realize that she had destroyed everything she cared about, not just everything I cared about. Eventually, I heard the first hesitant step, a slow, creaking movement down the staircase. I didn't react. She came into view a moment later, lingering in the doorway of the living room. She looked smaller than usual, wrapped up in one of those oversized sweatshirts she liked to wear to bed, her arms hugging herself. Her face was pale, eyes red-rimmed from crying. But there was something else in her expression, too, something calculating. She was studying me, testing the air, trying to figure out how mad I really was. I didn't give her anything. I just sat there, expression blank. Finally, she broke the silence. I don't know what to say, she murmured, voice small. I said nothing. She shifted uncomfortably, rubbing her arms. Are you just gonna ignore me now? Still nothing. She swallowed hard, stepping further into the room. Can we talk? I let out a slow breath through my nose. Talk. My voice was quiet, controlled. Her fingers curled into her sleeves. I messed up, okay? I know that. I didn't mean for it to happen. I almost laughed. Didn't mean for it to happen. Like she had tripped and fallen into a motel bed. I finally turned to look at her, my gaze sharp. How long? She blinked. What? How long were you sleeping with him? She hesitated, a fraction of a second too long. And just like that, I had my answer. Longer than she was willing to admit. My jaw clenched. Don't lie to me, Emily. She flinched at the sound of her own name. I rarely ever used it. She let out a shuddering breath. A few months. I stared at her. Try again. She hesitated again, shifting on her feet. 6 months, she finally whispered. 6 months. Half a damn year. I felt my fingernails dig into the couch cushion, but I didn't react otherwise. I just kept watching her. She was nervous. Good. She licked her lips, glancing away. It didn't mean anything. I swear. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I smiled at that. A slow, humorless thing. So what were you trying to do? She swallowed. I don't know. I leaned forward slightly, my elbows on my knees. You knew exactly what you were doing. Her breath hitched. I was lonely. There it was. The classic excuse. I was lonely. I felt neglected. I didn't feel loved anymore. Blaming me for her choices. I tilted my head slightly, my voice low. So that's how this works now? You felt lonely, so you just what? Opened your legs for the nearest guy with a driver's license. She winced, shame flickering across her face. That's not fair. I let out a cold, empty laugh. Fair. She exhaled, pressing her hands to her face. I didn't mean for it to go this far, okay? It started as something stupid. He flirted with me. I flirted back. And then she trailed off, shoulders shaking. And then you ended up in a hotel with him. I finished for her. Her silence was an admission. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The weight of it all sat between us, thick and suffocating. And then, finally, she whispered, "Do you hate me?" I looked at her for a long, long time. And then I smiled. It was slow, cold, and it wasn't an answer, because she didn't deserve one. Her question hung in the air between us. Do you hate me? I could have answered. I could have told her exactly what I felt, the disgust, the fury, the absolute loss of respect. But what was the point? She already knew. Instead, I leaned back into the couch, stretching my legs out, making myself comfortable. Not because I was relaxed, far from it, but because I wanted to let her sit in her own discomfort. Emily shifted from foot to foot, hands wringing the sleeves of her sweatshirt. She had always been fidgety when she was nervous, but I had never seen her like this. Good. I wanted her to feel it. I exhaled slowly, finally speaking. I don't think it really matters what I feel, does it? Her mouth opened, then closed. What do you mean? I let my gaze drag over her, slow and deliberate. She looked small standing there in the dim glow of the living room light. Small and desperate. But that didn't matter anymore, because I wasn't going to let her feelings dictate what happened next. For the past 6 months, she had been in control. She had been the one making choices, sneaking around, deciding which lies to tell. Not anymore. I let a few seconds pass before answering. I mean, you don't get to ask me that. She blinked. What? I gave a humorless smile. You don't get to cheat on me, lie about it, then stand there and ask if I hate you. That's not how this works, Emily. Her breath hitched. I could see the emotions flicker across her face. Guilt, shame, panic. But I didn't care. This wasn't her moment. It was mine. She took a small, hesitant step forward. I know I messed up. I stared at her. That's an understatement. She swallowed. I don't know why I did it. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. You do. She winced. I leaned forward again, resting my elbows on my knees. You knew exactly what you were doing every single time you got in that car. Every single time you texted him. Every single time you walked into that hotel room. You weren't confused. You weren't lost. I tilted my head slightly. You just didn't care. Tears welled in her eyes, and for the first time, I saw real fear there. Not just fear of being caught. Fear of consequences. She had spent months lying to me, hiding behind a fake normal. And now? Now, she realized that normal was gone. She inhaled shakily. I care now. I smiled again, but it didn't reach my eyes. Oh, and why is that? She licked her lips, glancing away. Because I don't want to lose you. That made me laugh. It was a genuine laugh this time, sharp and amused because what a joke. She didn't want to lose me. Not when she was sneaking off with him. Not when she was lying to my face. Not when she was finding new ways to betray me every damn week. But now that she was caught, now she cared. I shook my head, rubbing a hand over my jaw. You know what's funny? I asked, voice calm. She hesitated. What? I looked up at her. You already lost me. Her whole body stilled. Her fingers curled tighter into her sleeves, her lower lip trembling slightly. You don't mean that. I raised a brow. Don't I? She stepped closer, her voice almost pleading. We can fix this. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. No, you can't fix this. She flinched at the emphasis, and I saw it. The exact moment the realization hit her. She had spent so much time convincing herself that she could talk her way out of this. That she could cry, apologize, make promises, and I would just, what? Forgive her? Move past it. Let her stay? Not a chance in hell. Silence stretched between us again, longer this time. Then, softly, barely above a whisper, she said, I don't want a divorce. I smiled again. That slow, deliberate, cruel smile. I don't care what you want. Her eyes widened. For so long, she had controlled everything. Had manipulated the situation, had dictated what I knew, what I didn't. And now, she was powerless. She let out a shaky breath. Please, just let's talk about this. I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair. You want to talk? I gave a short, bitter chuckle. All right, let's talk. She nodded quickly, relief flashing across her face. She actually thought she was getting through to me. Pathetic. I met her gaze, my voice calm. You cheated on me. Her lips parted, like she was going to say something, but I held up a hand. You chose to cheat on me, I corrected. Over and over again. For 6 months. She swallowed. I tilted my head slightly. And you thought you'd never get caught. Her fingers curled into her sweatshirt. You thought I'd never know. I continued, voice flat. That I'd just keep being an idiot, trusting you, while you ran around with some random Uber driver like our marriage was a joke. She bit her lip. It wasn't. Wasn't what? I cut her off. Wasn't a joke? Then tell me, Emily, what was it? She had no answer. Because there was no answer. Nothing she said now would make a damn bit of difference. She had thrown away our marriage the second she let that man touch her. And now, she was terrified because she finally realized what that meant. I pushed up from the couch, standing tall. She took a step back. Good. I moved toward the doorway, then stopped just long enough to turn and look at her one last time. I don't care what you want, I said again, voice cold. You stopped mattering the second you chose him over me. Then, without another word, I walked away, because this was her mess to sit in now. And for the first time in months, I was finally free. I walked away, not because I had nothing left to say, but because she didn't deserve to hear it. Behind me, I could hear her breathing, shaky, uneven, as if she were holding back sobs. Maybe she was. Maybe she thought that if she cried hard enough, if she looked pitiful enough, I'd turn around. But she had lost that privilege. She had spent months walking out of our home, choosing him, choosing deception, choosing her own selfish desires. Now, she could feel what it was like to be the one left behind. I headed for the stairs, every step slow, deliberate. I wasn't rushing. This was my house. I wasn't the one sneaking around. I reached the second floor and entered our bedroom. No, my bedroom. It didn't feel like ours anymore. How could it? I looked around, eyes scanning every inch of the space we had shared for years. The bed, the framed wedding photo on the nightstand, the closet where her clothes were still hanging, her side of the dresser with perfume bottles and jewelry scattered across the top. All of it was a lie. Every touch, every laugh, every whispered, I love you, spoken between these walls. I had built this life with her, and the whole time, I thought we had been standing on something solid, but it had been sand, and she had been the tide, washing it all away while I was too damn blind to see it. I exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand down my face. No more waiting, no more hesitation. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and unzipped it. Clothes. Essentials. I wasn't leaving permanently. Not yet. But I wasn't going to spend another night under the same roof as her. Not after everything. I moved quickly, grabbing jeans, shirts, socks, whatever I needed for the next few days. My toothbrush. My razor. I wasn't running. I was giving her space to sit in her own filth, to feel the weight of what she had done. She needed to understand that this wasn't some temporary argument, something that could be fixed with I'm sorry and empty promises. She had killed our marriage, and she needed to choke on the aftermath. I zipped the bag shut and slung it over my shoulder. Then I turned toward the dresser. My gaze landed on the framed wedding photo. I stared at it for a long time. Two people, smiling, holding hands, frozen in a moment that no longer meant anything. I picked it up, holding it in my hands. How many times had I looked at this photo and felt pride? Felt love? I felt nothing now. Without thinking, I threw it. The glass shattered against the wall, pieces raining down onto the floor. I stood there for a second, watching the fragments catch the light. That was our marriage now. Shattered. Irreparable. I turned and left the room. She was still in the living room when I came down the stairs. She had moved to the couch, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around herself. Her eyes were red, her cheeks wet. Good. Let her cry. She blinked up at me, seeing the duffel bag. Her breath hitched. Where are you going? I adjusted the strap on my shoulder. Not here. Her lips trembled. You're leaving? I gave a humorless smile. What? You thought I was just going to crawl into bed with you after what you did? She flinched, her gaze dropping to her lap. No, I don't want you to go. I let out a slow breath. I'm sure you didn't want to get caught either. Her eyes snapped back up to me, glassy and desperate. Please, I don't want to lose you. I studied her for a moment. She meant that. Not because she loved me, because she loved what I gave her. The security, the stability, the life. She wasn't crying because she missed me. She was crying because she was afraid. Afraid of what came next. Afraid that I wasn't playing along with the script in her head, where I forgave her, where we went to counseling, where she made it up to me. She wanted control back. I wasn't going to give it to her. I took a step toward the door, my voice cold. You should start thinking about where you're going to live. Her entire body stiffened. What? I reached for the doorknob. You heard me. Wait. She shot up from the couch, panic flashing across her face. We can talk about this. Just let's take some time, I turned back, cutting her off with a sharp glare. Time. I let out a hollow laugh. I gave you 6 months of time, Emily. You had all the time in the world while you were screwing him. Her face crumpled. She knew I wasn't bluffing. She knew she was losing everything. I looked at her one last time. I'll be back in a few days. My voice was ice. If you're still here, you better be packing. Her breath hitched, her body swaying like I had physically hit her. Good. Let her feel it. Let her feel every bit of the destruction she caused. Then, without another word, I walked out the door, and for the first time in months, the air felt lighter. Because now, this was her problem, and I was done being her fool.